talk about a little bit about retinols, retinoid science, and what makes the industry really exciting to be around today. So first off, I'm sure many of us have heard the term retinol. We feel like we know what it means, but then if someone were to actually ask us, like, what is retinol? We'd be like, well, it's that thing for your skin, right? So let's figure out what that thing for your skin really is. So retinoids is actually a classification of ingredients, and they are all derivatives of vitamin A. So anytime you see the term retinoids, we're talking about vitamin A. And the active form of vitamin A for your skin is something called retinoic acid. Retinoic acid, though, is not readily available across the globe in cosmetic ingredients. It's reserved for something that you would get from a dermatologist or a doctor. So in the cosmetic industry, ingredients like retinol or retinaldehydes with an A, retinol, AL, retinol, retinol esters and bakuchiol are all ingredients that you will see in cosmetic products, and they're all retinoids, but each of these has to be converted into retinoic acid by your skin in order for it to have any benefits there. So if we look at this triangle on the right, it's inverted. So retinoic acid, again, is the most potent. It's what's available in the skin. Retinol or retinaldehyde is one step away from that conversion. So it has to be converted into retinoic acid, and then it can be utilized by the skin. Whereas retinol with the OL has to be converted into retinal, and then retinal can be converted into retinoic acid. And then retinol esters, obviously you can see there it's retinol with an ester at the end. Okay, so then that's converted to retinol. The retinol is converted to retinal, or the retinaldehydes, which is converted to retinoic acid. And retinol esters, you've probably seen these a lot. This is like retinol palmitate. Now, when we look at this triangle too, the further down we get, like we've talked about how they're a little bit less potent, but then the further up we get, we also start to get more irritation that's associated with it. So if you've used a retinol, like a retinoic acid or a retinal or even a retinol, you've probably also experienced some of those side effects. These side effects actually have their very own name. It's called a retinol purge or a retinol reaction, and it can result in flakiness and irritation on the skin. But the reason why people want to use retinoids is because retinoids have great benefits for the skin. Retinoids can have all sorts of benefits. But before we get into that, let's talk about the difference between aged skin and youthful skin so we can really understand how these benefits are impacting the skin. So if you look here, you've got your aged skin on the left and your youthful skin on the right. And if we look at these structures right here, these ones that kind of make the octagons, those represent your collagen in your skin. And collagen is a structural protein found in your dermis, and it kind of helps to hold your skin out, if that makes sense. Because when your collagen breaks down, right, it allows the skin to cave in, and that is essentially what allows lines and wrinkles to form. Then we have these little bands that are all wrapped around, and those represent your elastin. And elastin is like the little rubber bands in your skin, and so they help to hold your skin taut. So I always like to have people take their hand and pinch it and see how fast it comes back. And if it comes back fairly quickly, that has to do with a good amount of that elastin or those elastic fibers in your skin. Now, if you were to close your eyes and you think about like your great-great-grandma, right? If they were still around, and not that I would recommend that you'd pinch their skin, but if you pinch their skin, you might find that their skin very slowly melts back down because it lacks those elastic fibers or that elastin. Then we also have, oops, didn't mean to do that. We also have these little globules, and these globules represent glycoaminoglycans. And glycoaminoglycans kind of fill in and is what we refer to as the ground substance. And glycoaminoglycans can help to hold moisture and water in there. And they just kind of fill in that space and help to support the collagen and the elastin at the same time. You'll also notice that when we look at this aged skin, we start to see these melanosomes start to group together, and they start to overproduce pigmentation, and that can cause the appearance of age spots in the skin. And lastly, you can start to see that on this youthful skin, this area between the dermis and the epidermis is called your dermal epidermal junction. And that's very wavy in your youth, and it becomes more flattened as we get older. Now, that flattening, not only does it make it so that your epidermis is less thick and less robust, but it also makes it so that there's less surface area. And when there's less surface area, there's less nutrients being passed between the dermis and the epidermis. And obviously that can have implications that involve things such as hydration. And so you can kind of see the differences between aged skin and youthful skin here. So when we talk about retinoids and why they are so great for the skin, the reason for this is because they have a wealth of anti-aging benefits. They can unclog pores, they can smooth visible wrinkles, they can help with cell renewal. So again, if we think back to those images, right? The cell renewal is how at the basal layer of the skin where that dermal epidermal junction is, how well those are splitting and creating new cells, right? It can thicken the skin and it can help to even skin tone. And retinoids are really considered to be the gold standard when it comes to skin aging experts like dermatologists. So retinoids, again, can induce that epidermal thickening, which we want. They can inhibit UV induction of MMPs. And MMPs are enzymes that are found in the skin that actually break down your proteins. So your collagen and your elastin, right? And you want some of that, right? Because collagen and elastin does wear down, but you don't want your MMPs to be outpacing your ability to synthesize these. And that's what happens when we start to get a little bit older, which again is another benefit of retinoids. Retinoids can actually stimulate that collagen synthesis in photo-age skin. They can increase those GAGs, or those ground substances, GAGs being an acronym for glycoaminoglycans again. And they can reduce facial hyperpigmentation. There's some thought as to what the mechanism of action is with this. Some research indicates that it just has to do with the cell turnover again, then you're just getting rid of that hyperpigmentation off the surface. But there's then other research that indicates that it might be a tyrosinase inhibitor. Tyrosinase is an enzyme found in the melanosomes themselves, in the melanocytes, that make it so that you need tyrosinase in order to create melanin. So if you can inhibit or decrease that tyrosinase, then the melanin production begins to slow. So again, all of those different mechanisms of action, right? The retinoids have the ability to thicken your epidermis. They can help with this cell turnover. They can help with the collagen synthesis. They can reduce the degradation of these proteins, and they can help with help it promote glycoaminoglycans, and they can inhibit this discoloration from forming. So when we talk about how retinoids are the gold standard, you can kind of see why that is, because the retinoids can kind of hit the full gamut of aging concerns that people have. So that is all of the benefits of retinoids, right? But retinoids also have their challenges at the same time. First of all, retinoids are highly unstable. So they are easily degraded by light and oxygen. And if you think about how formulas are made, right? We use water in formulas quite a bit. Water has oxygen associated with that, and that means that water can degrade the retinoids. And because of that, then sometimes these retinoids, especially if you're looking at like a prescription that has a retinoic acid in it, they tend to be these anhydrous formulas that are really goopy. They're not very aesthetically pleasing. And so they're not really nice to put on the skin. They don't have a good skin feel at the same time. And if you use them during the morning, then they have the potential to, if you go out in the sun, right, and you right away get that degradation of them, and you're not getting any real benefit from them. The other is something that I mentioned before is when you use retinoids, especially your retinol and your retinol, your AL and your OL, right? You can get these retinoid reactions or the retinoid purge. And this can result in dryness, redness, flaking, tightness, and just overall discomfort of the skin, right? And that can be a transitory adaptation where after a period of 4 or 5, 6 weeks, your skin starts to adapt to it. But that's a long time to have to go through this unpleasant look in order to be able to see the benefits of it. And so all of this really impacts consumer use and consumer appeal of using retinoids. But luckily, the ingredient technology is having great advancements. And for the cosmetic industry, we've been able to capitalize on some of this. So one thing that Nu Skin has identified is a vendor that has a stabilized retinol. So it's a retinol that's entrapped in a polymer that encapsulation, and it has this unique chemical structure that makes it so that it is not exposed to oxygen or light. So even if it's put it in a water-soluble formula, it's protected from that, and it's protected from light also. It also has some antioxidants associated with it, like tocopherol, that helps prevent it from further degradation. This unique encapsulation helps it to have a sustained release in the skin, which helps to reduce that irritation. The emulsion has stability, so you can put it in a more aesthetically pleasing formula, and it can also enhance sebum control at the same time. So here's some research that the vendor did on this ingredient. So first you can look to the left. You have what's considered to be neat retinol, which is just your typical retinol in the blue line. And then you've got your retinol in this delivery system, in this encapsulation. And you can see how quickly that blue line gets released versus how slowly the retinol gets released. And it's that slow release that allows it to have some increased effectiveness because it's been stabilized, and it also allows it to reduce sensitization. On the right, you'll see a graph that really illustrates its ability to remain stable in formulations. So again, when you look at 25 degrees Celsius or 45 degrees Celsius, you can see how we're seeing some consistency in that degradation. And that's what allows us to also have a product that has a 2-year shelf life, right? So we can justify that for this product. And that's the other thing, like it doesn't do us a lot of good if there's ingredients that aren't stable longer term. So that's what's pretty cool about this specific retinol. But when we look at it, sorry, I apologize. So then the next part is we're looking at the overall sensitization of it in vivo. So an anti-aging lotion with this retinol system was developed, and an anti-aging lotion with the standard retinol was developed. And you can see this here. And what they looked at was the cumulative irritation score. Cumulative irritation score is actually a standardized score that's utilized in different cosmetic testing. And you can see that when we look at the overall irritation for the typical retinol brand, that irritation is high or higher than when we look at it in this encapsulated format. And it's interesting too that even this placebo lotion has some irritation associated with it, right? So if we actually take this out and we just look at what is potentially the potential irritation that this formula is causing, it's very, very low. And so this made this technology exciting for us. And so we talked about the benefits of retinoids, right, or retinoic acid. But if we look at this research specific on retinol, because this is an encapsulated retinol, right? Retinol itself in sun-protected aged skin has the ability to stimulate keratinocyte proliferation. So that's another way of saying that it helps to stimulate cell renewal. It can increase that dermal vascularity, so the transition of nutrients between the dermis into the epidermis, and it can stimulate fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are actually the cells inside the dermis that then produce that collagen and elastin. Research on retinol also has shown that it can inhibit that UV induction of MMPs again and stimulate collagen, so much like we talked about before for the overall classification. It can induce that dermal thickening and the keratinocyte proliferation, and it can improve the appearance of wrinkles or decrease the appearance of wrinkles. So this is research that is very specific to just retinol in the OL form. The next ingredient that we thought was super interesting is a retinoic acid ester. It's called hydroxypinocolone retinate. So for today's presentation, we're just going to refer to it as HPR. Okay, so this is a cosmetic grade ester of all trans retinoic acid. So if we kind of define that a little bit. So we talked about here how you have your retinoic acid, and then you've got your retinols and your retinaldehydes. This actually kind of fits in this new category right in between here. So it's a cosmetic ester, which means it can be used in cosmetic formulas, but it's actually an ester of the all-trans retinoic acid. So it actually can bind directly to those retinoid receptors in the skin without the need of having that metabolic breakdown that you need for retinol or retinaldehyde. So it is in its most biologically active form. But because it has that ester associated with it, it could still mitigate some of the irritation potential that is off compared to retinol. So the ingredient information on this HPR shows that it has a reduction of lines and wrinkles, and that was observed in as quickly as 14 days, which is really, really fast. They've applied the serum twice daily, and that reduction in lines and wrinkles was up to 60%. That wasn't the average, that was the up to. So I just want to make sure that that's clarified. But that still has great potential. Here we can see in another study where they had individuals use a formula with HPR in it, or this retinoic acid ester, and they looked at the reduction of skin roughness. So if we look at this scale here, it's important to note that the higher the score, right? The higher the score, then the more skin roughness you have, and the lower the score, then the more smooth your skin is in this Vivio scan instrumentation. So there's a 50% improvement in skin texture by day 14. And even the results by day 7 are statistically significant. Now, what I think is really interesting about this, though, too, is if you're having that reduction in skin roughness, that means that you're not getting that flakiness that, again, is often associated with retinoids or that retinoid reaction, right? And then this, I think, is super exciting. So this is the reduction in visual aid spots. And again, let's make sure we understand the scale, right? The scale is best is 0. So that's where we're having the least amount of visual age spots, or like the lessening of them. And 10 is like the worst, like the darkest spot ever, right? And again, we're seeing that after 4 weeks, we're getting that 50% improvement in the reduction of age spots. And again, we're getting statistically significant results as early as 7 days with this ingredient. And here is another, and this ingredient doesn't cause, again, the type of irritations that are commonly associated with retinoic acid or even retinols or retinols. In this test, they did a 24-hour occlusive patch. So this means that they put the product on the skin and then they covered it so it can't even evaporate. You can't get any of that flash off. And we're not seeing that's comparing the amount of irritation of the 0.5% HPR to a 0.5% retinol. And again, if you think back to our inverted triangle, right? The retinoic acid ester is here. You've got the retinol and then the retinol OL. So again, we're getting less than over down here, but we're getting a more active form of the retinoid at the same time, which is just exactly what we want, right? The last thing that's super interesting about this ingredient technology is that HPR can be used during the day. In this study, they had individuals do, again, another occlusive patch. They irradiated the skin for 15 minutes, which is the equivalent of a midsummer sunlight exposure. And I know that you guys in the Pacific are just cringing, right? Because you guys are so good about staying out of the sun. So this is only being done for research purposes. And they evaluated the skin at baseline, 24 hours, 48 hours, and 7 days. And what they found is that you didn't get the phototoxicity with HPR use that you would get with like typical retinols. Again, usually when you're using a retinoid, if you go out into the sun, then that exacerbates some of those skin reactions that are associated with it because you're having that cell turnover. Then the other thing that makes this time super, super exciting is the use of peptides and the identification of peptides. So there's lots of different peptides out in the market, right? And peptides can be evaluated for all sorts of different reasons. But what caught our eye is that there is a oligopeptide 1 that actually has the ability to boost the retinol benefits. So this is an AI-discovered nature-identical peptide that has been shown to target aging skin concerns on its own very quickly, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it actually can increase collagen production by 4 times over retinol alone ex vivo. So they actually took skin explants, so skin that people weren't using anymore, which sounds weird, but from plastic surgery, right? And they added retinol to the skin from this that was donated, and then they added retinol plus this oligopeptide to it, and they looked at how much collagen was then produced by the skin, and there were 4 times more collagen produced by the skin that had this booster and the retinol over the retinol by itself. And they also found some additional skin proteins that also had increases like fibrillin, and fibrillin is a precursor to elastin. But this oligopeptide 1 also has anti-aging benefits of its own. It can help with fine lines, texture, pores, and pigmentation, and you're able to see these results in as early as 2 weeks. So let's get into that just a little bit more. So again, this unique oligopeptide can help restore extracellular matrix. So again, your extracellular matrix, if you think back to those images I was showing before, is really all of that stuff in your dermis, right? Your collagen and your elastin and your glycosaminoglycans. So in this evaluation, which used human dermal fibroblasts in vitro, so it's a model, we looked at elastin and collagen and fibrillin, and you can see that there was a 17% increase in collagen expression, a 25% increase in elastin expression, and a 33% increase in fibrillin expression with this oligopeptide by itself over control. What's actually really interesting about this too is it has the ability to target inflammation markers and decrease those. So this becomes important because when we talked about MMPs earlier, MMPs can be exacerbated when our skin is inflamed, and skin inflammation or overall body inflammation kind of just happens with age. But this peptide has the ability to reduce those markers like TNF alpha, IL-6 and IL-1, and all of these are just different inflammation markers. And so this indicates that it has the ability to protect your skin from that exaggerated degradation that happens with age. In this evaluation, and we really like this company because they did so much research. They really wooed us with their research, and they did a lot of the research that we would have wanted to see done. And so we were super excited to find this company. So oligopeptide 1 can also reduce the appearance of wrinkles. So this is an ex vivo study, right? It was on 98 females age 45 to 65. It lasted for just 4 weeks. And they applied the product with this illegal peptide 1 to 1/2 their face, and they looked at wrinkle depth, collagen density, and self-perception. And what they found is that at the different doses, they actually looked at 2 different doses. At the different doses, that there was a decrease in the wrinkle effect, or the wrinkling of the skin, and not the average, but up to 18.9% reduction in deep lines and wrinkles. In another study, they had 109 people, and this included males and females, a slightly older age group. And this went for 8 weeks, and it was versus placebo. And what they found is versus the placebo product, that when they looked at dyspigmentation or hyperpigmentation in the skin, there was up to a 13.9% decrease by week 2 over baseline. And by week 8, that grew to 19.6%. So this again shows that change in like the quick change, and then even the more long-term improvements that you get when you add this illegal peptide to your formulas. And they also saw similar onset of benefits when we looked at pore appearance and skin smoothness and complexion. So again, this just shows the average reduction in pore appearance at week 2 and week 8 for both. For the pore appearance, and then the up to, right? The best of the best. So again, and then the same with skin smoothness and complexion. So again, you can see that you get this quick onset and then the long-term results. And again, this is important because when we get those quick onsets, right, we are more likely to want to continue to use a product. It kind of gets us hooked. It's hard to wait 8 weeks for something to start working. So this is now research that Nu Skin conducted. When we looked at gene expression, we looked at the gene expression of a retinoid by itself versus the combination of retinol, HPR, and illegal peptide 1. And what we found was pretty interesting. So when we looked at just the retinoid, right, the retinoid had the ability to increase this aquaporin expression. Aquaporins have to do with hydration in the cells. And there was a 70% increase in aquaporin, which is good. MMP, again, we've talked a little bit about that and how it degrades the collagen and elastin in the skin. There was a 40% downregulation of MMPs, which is the direction that you'd want those to go. This PER1 gene is a circadian rhythm regulator. Circadian rhythm is kind of like your sleep-wake cycle. And so you might wonder why this is important. Well, at night, right, if we can get back on those typical sleep-wake type schedules, and we can get our skin back on that, right, at night is when our skin does all of its repairing. And so the fact that you're able to upregulate this gene is an indication that you're getting that repair at night that your skin or your body so desperately needs. Collagen 1A is a little bit more self-explanatory, right? It is indicating that you just have an increase of this gene that is going to create collagen by 30%. And ELN is a gene that codes for elastin, and that is upregulated 40%. So all of this is really, really good, right? When we look at the combination, though, what we find is that MMP1 gene that we were talking about was downregulated by 180% in this combination. Your elastin gene, again, was still upregulated, so you get that increase for elastin at 40%. Your PER1 gene, again, that gene that works with your circadian rhythm, right? That was upregulated 60% in this combination. And then we've got your RXR alpha and your RXR gamma genes. And these are actually genes where you have your retinoid receptor, right? And so if you're getting an upregulation of these, then I mean, that's actually kind of telling you that you're triggering that retinoid receptor that we want in your skin, and you're getting those benefits from vitamin A. And again, you get a 30% increase of your RXR alpha and a 50% increase of your RXR gamma. So this was really interesting. And again, like I said, this is work that we did at Nu Skin. Our researchers did it, that kind of illustrates the ongoing benefits or the additional benefits that you get when you put these ingredients in combination versus just using a standard retinoid by itself. So we're super excited at this time because it really shows that we're entering a new generation of science where we're bolstering the old with the new, right? Retinols and retinoids have been around forever, but the fact that you've got a retinol that is stabilized, that isn't going to have some of those irritation that we typically find with retinol, actually a retinoic acid ester, something that's so close to being a retinoic acid, but again, without that irritation, and then an AI peptide that has the ability to act as a retinol booster makes this a super exciting time to be in the cosmetic industry. So that was it.